How's it going, y'all? This is Nate Drolet, and welcome back to this Advanced Climber series. We're coming down the final stretch on this series. We've got about 15 more points left, and a lot of these are my favorites. I'm super excited to go through them. Without wasting any time up front, let's go ahead and jump in. Number 84. Stop moving the goalpost. With advanced climbers, this tends to show up in one of two ways. One, people will often move the goalpost right after they succeed in something. They'll, have their success and then immediately they're like, that's whatever, and they kick it down the road. And the other one is just before they have success. And that one's a little harder to spot, and it's a bigger problem than I think a lot of people realize. Now that you've been climbing for a while, wins don't come as often as they used to, unfortunately. When you're a beginner or intermediate climber, you are sending new things, new grades, kind of all of the time, even if it doesn't feel like that way. If you're an intermediate climber and you're like, I've been plateaued for 6 months, it's okay. You'll get beyond this. Everyone who's an advanced or higher climber right now is like 6 months is not a plateau. That is just a little blip. That's a rounding error in the grand scheme of things. So when you are a newer climber, it's a little more okay that when you have success, you can be like, it's not a big deal. What's next? What's next? What's next? That kind of mindset is a little bit more okay. You can get away with it. But if you're an advanced climber doing that, it can often feel like you never see success. We all know that person who works hard, trains for something, projects it to death, and when they finally send it, they're like, it's whatever, it wasn't even that hard, and they just downplay it. And you're kind of bummed for them. You're like, no, this is cool. You worked hard. You should celebrate this. For that person, I think there's a lot of value in stopping and celebrating. And we'll talk about this in the next point a little bit, but it is motivating to see tasks through to completion. It does a lot of good for you. And I think it's just so important that we do that we, instead of immediately saying, it's whatever, let me focus on the future, stop and say, okay, cool. I worked hard for this. I made a plan. I saw this through to completion. That's cool. And once you actually pause and reflect on that, then we can say, okay, what's next? But don't move the goalpost immediately. The second way that I see this show up a lot is people will do a lot of preparation. They will get excited for a goal. And then once they're close to it, or once they are capable of achieving that goal in their mind, they immediately move the goalpost back. And this one leads to people being plateaued for eternity. There's something about some of us to where the second you realize you can do something, it kind of loses its luster. It's more exciting when something is this big, audacious goal compared to when you're like, if I put in the time, I know I can get this done. But you actually need to put in the time and get the thing done. That's a very important part of this process. Otherwise, it's all just talk. I used to know someone who did this all the time, and I think that his story is indicative of what a lot of people go through. I had this friend who every summer would just train so hard. And he would say, you know what, this fall, I want to send a bunch of V10s, a couple V11s. I think that's a good, realistic goal, and that excites me. There are so many cool climbs in that difficulty range that I'm excited for. And so you know what he would do? Man, he would train really hard, really intelligently. He would put in good work. And man, the fall would come and be right around the corner. He'd be in the best shape of his life every season. And then right when it was there, he would go out, maybe climb a new V10, maybe even like a new V11, something that showed him, oh, wow, I'm here. I have reached this level. Immediately, he would move the goalpost back and he would say, well, actually, it'd be way cooler if I could do some V12s and V13, maybe projects and V13s, who knows? And he would skip over what he had trained for. He wouldn't go climb a bunch of V10s. Do some V11s, he would go right past them. He'd go try and mega project these other things. He wouldn't build up confidence. He wouldn't gain momentum. He wouldn't develop the new skills that these, lower level climbs would give him. And oftentimes he would get discouraged and get burnt out, and he wouldn't even be able to climb through the entire season. He'd be like, I thought I was in great shape. What happened? And then it wouldn't be until, late into the training season the next year that he'd be like, okay, now for real this time, I'm going to come back. I'm going to train hard. It's going to be good. And this happened to him for years, where had he just stuck with it one season and said, okay, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to train. Here's my goal. Now that the season is here, I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to change the goal. I'm going to do everything that I can to work hard for this. Had he done that just one season, it would have changed everything. He would have developed momentum and confidence. He would have learned all the lessons that, a bunch of V10s and V11s would have taught him. Not only that, by truly chasing the goal, it would have taught him how good his processes actually are. How good was his training? How ready was he? Whenever he makes a strategy for the season of, I want to climb this at this time of year, this time of year, this boulder should hopefully have me trained up hard enough for crimps to be able to do this next boulder. All of the big picture stuff that really makes a good outdoor climber, if you are not chasing goals in that way, picking something and pursuing it, if you're kind of just going around and doing what motivates you that day, you don't really get to test your processes. And if you're not testing them, it's going to make it a lot harder to improve upon them. I think one reason why so many of us fall into this trap is because, it's exciting, the idea of, wow, I'm actually in really good shape. What if I could do more than I thought? What if I could do bigger and better? But I see it fail for so many people so often. Early on in your climbing, this might happen because our improvements happen at a much higher rate. So you might skip a grade without even realizing it, kind of thing. You're like, oh, I think I'd like to climb V6 this year. Maybe you end up climbing V8. Amazing. But once you've been climbing for 10 plus years, those huge jumps don't seem to happen quite as often. If they do, tell me how you did it. I'd love to know. In a past episode, I talked about this idea of a blue collar mindset of showing up, punching the clock, day in, day out. That's really a tool of incredible climbers. This falls into place with that. Set your goal, show up, punch the clock. If a goal is too easy, oh no, you achieved your goals. We get to do harder things now. Like, yay, amazing. I love that. That doesn't happen too often. If it does, that's really cool. But you don't truly know, was this the correct thing, until you pursue it. Very last thing here, if you do set a goal and you get to it too quickly, this still informs you. You can now say, all right, I did improve better than I thought. Maybe this can recalibrate how I approach my seasons from now on. This is still valuable data. Number 85, learn how to celebrate the small wins. This shows up in two ways. The first one is day-to-day, even go-to-go on climbs, especially routes, but on boulders for sure as well. And then the second part is whenever you do achieve a goal, learning how to celebrate that a little bit. And this goes hand in hand with number 84, the one before this. You've been climbing for a while, which means you're probably trying harder rock climbs. And if that's the case, success comes a little slower than it used to, doesn't it? If you're a sport climber especially, early on, you can get away with saying things like, I'm so upset with this go. I only got a 2-bolt high point. I thought I was going to send. Look, now it's like, you got a 2-bolt high point? Incredible. We take those every day. It's so fascinating to me. Whenever I climb around really good sport climbers, it's wild the things they'll say. They'll fall on the same move that they've fallen on for 6 days in a row for 20 attempts over those 6 days. And they'll come down and they'll be like, oh man, that was great. Yeah, I still haven't stuck that foot move that I'm falling on, but this was the first time where when I looked at it, I believed I was going to stick it. And it took me until just now to realize I hadn't actually believed it. But now I believe. They didn't get any closer to sticking it, but because their mindset has changed about this 1 foot move on a 120-foot rock climb, that's a win. And they celebrate it. They'll even say something like, I don't know if you saw, but at the 3rd bolt, I did a little one of these after that clip. Normally that clip's really hard. I've never gotten a little mini shake. So clearly things are coming along. And look, I think that if you need to gaslight yourself into believing you're improving at your project, do it. Psychological warfare yourself into harder grades. For many of us, this can be hard to see as a flaw in ourselves. You might say, well, I'm just being realistic about what's happening. I've fallen on this move on this boulder 3 sessions in a row. So clearly I have no business on it. That's not me being negative, just realistic. It's like, okay, let's take a step back. What if you saw someone else acting like that and saying these things? If someone was like, oh, this is terrible. I have no business on this boulder. My training's useless. I should go back to the gym. Why am I even trying this? You would be quick, especially if this is a friend of yours. You'd be like, hey, actually, the opening of this boulder looks really smooth. No, you haven't stuck this move yet, but day one, you could barely generate for it. Now you're slapping not only the hold, but you're hitting it in the way you want to stick it. You're slowing it down more and more. Yes, you haven't stuck it yet, but you have covered a vast distance between where you started and where you are now. Yeah, stick with this, man. This is bouldering. Bouldering is throwing yourself at the same few moves over and over and trying to take the small wins. We can really see it well in other people. Sometimes it's harder to hear it come from ourselves. As funny as it may seem, this is a good reason for videotaping sessions. Whenever I'm videotaping my bouldering just to try and learn moves, I don't like having to walk back and forth to my phone a bunch, so oftentimes I'll just, I bring a little battery pack, plug my phone in, and just hit record. And so then I can have my full 1 hour session. I don't have to go fuss with the phone. I get to forget it's even there. And I get to just have my session, and that's very nice. Something that's interesting about this is not only does it capture all of the climbing itself, but it captures all the moments in between. And my self-talk maybe doesn't feel negative to me in the moment because I'm just observing what's happening. I am a non-biased observer, clearly, in my mind. But when I'm back home watching video and not in the heat of the moment and emotionally attached to this boulder I want to send, suddenly I can hear the things I say and I can hear how I talk about moves, or maybe when I stick a move, if I'm like, actually that was like a highlight of the session and I blew right past it because immediately I was thinking about how hard the next sequence was. And maybe had I taken that win and said, oh, that's cool. I've tried this move for 3 days now, finally stuck it. Cool. Okay, that's great. I could have used that motivation to really buoy me for the rest of my session. But instead, maybe I just glossed right over it and felt like this was just kind of a meh session. And because of it, I didn't get more progress. The other reason this is important is because as you are climbing grades that are harder and harder, we're no longer just getting strong enough to have a grade feel the exact same as when, let's say if you're a V5 climber. V5 feels like a certain difficulty and it requires a certain tool set for you. For a lot of people, when you get to V10, it's not like you're as equivalently strong and capable. No, you're like scraping up every tactic you can. You're dialing in this boulder within an inch of its life. There are no fair fights when it comes to sending hard boulders. You're going to use every tactic, mental strategy. You're going to use every piece of equipment you have. You've got a Makita fan. You're, making shade over the boulder to help cool it off. You've got all your shoes. You've got a stick brush. You've got everything. Compared to that V5 climber, that was a Luddite back then. That's who you were. You hadn't seen the light of high-level tactics and strategy and belief that you have now. And because of this, we're just working with razor-thin margins. That is what a lot of pushing to your limit is the margins become so thin. Because of that, take the wins, man. They're not going to come as often as we want, so when they happen, pause, celebrate them, be like, yes, cool. That took me so long to do this 1 foot move, but I did it. Rad. Take that, let it kind of get you excited to keep putting in more work, because there's always going to be more work. Last part on this, and I'll keep it brief because I touched on it a bit in the last point. When you do have your big wins, you send the boulder, you send the round, whatever it is, stop and celebrate it. I think that is important. We often hear about enjoying the journey and not the destination. And I think to a degree we can take that a bit too far. And what that ends up meaning is when we do succeed, we often blow right by it and we say, okay, what's next? But I think that celebrating wins can actually help you appreciate the journey a little bit more. Let's say you projected a route for 3 seasons. You trained hard for it and you finally did it. Cool. Stop, reflect, be happy about it. Think about like all the work you did up until this point, because that's cool. That's cool that you stuck with something for this long and you achieved it. We only get so many of those in our life. Stop and bask in it for a second. And I think this can really help highlight that journey of saying, yeah, you know what? I did put in a lot of good work to get here. And I had a lot of fun sessions. Oh man. Remember the first few days when I tried this and I thought like, maybe I'll do this in like 20 tries. Oh, boy, was I wrong. But this has been a good time. Pausing and reflecting has so much value, and I think it's okay to celebrate. It's something I don't see enough of, and especially you kind of don't need to when you're a beginner or intermediate, because you just keep getting wins all the time. Pause. It's okay. Enjoy it. Number 86. Can you interpret beta from what other people say? This may sound obvious. Stay with me. First off, Climbing is a social sport. We spend time around other people, and even if you boulder alone a lot, you might still watch beta videos or you just hear other people talk. We should be learning from other people. I've said earlier, don't make all the mistakes on your own. Learn from other people's mistakes. Listening to the way other people talk about beta and talk about climbing can teach you so much. And this goes beyond simple lefts and rights. Something that's really cool about climbing is this isn't something that we all get into when we're, 5 or 6 years old. Unfortunately, we would be so much better. Instead, a lot of us have other hobbies, other journeys that led us here. Maybe you were a skateboarder. Maybe you did Pilates. Maybe you just played video games. Who knows? There's a million different things that lead people into climbing. And what's so cool about that is that experience still carries over. It's not the same. It's not a one-to-one, but you could be a competitive rifle shooter. And there are going to be things that you take from that sport and apply here. And that will also show up in the way you talk about things. If I'm standing around a bunch of different people and I hear them talking about beta and how they're approaching a climb, I want to listen to how they talk about things because that reflects how they're perceiving these moves, this problem. Also, they might be using certain terminologies that I don't understand that maybe we don't have in our normal climbing vernacular. Maybe someone says, I want to create a lot of back pressure on this hold as I'm doing this move. I want to ask them, what do you mean by that? And they might say, oh, well, I used to be an arm wrestler and it's this concept from that. It's like, oh, tell me more. I want to understand this. Early in climbing, you need to learn all the climbing vernacular of side pull, cast on, undercling, sloper, all of these things. But as you become more advanced, we need to draw in from everywhere and be able to have these conversations with different people to understand new ways of moving and thinking about challenges. So many people are verbal processors. Just simply talking problems out loud helps them a lot. And because of that, when you listen to other people talk, you can hear the way their brain works and the way they're thinking about these problems. And good chances are it's going to be different than the way that you are thinking about these problems or these crux moves. Take that, use it. You can gather so much information. And a lot of times it will apply way beyond this one boulder. You might hear the way that someone conceptualizes a roof in a way that you had never considered. To them, there is no up and down. Maybe when they're talking about roof climbing, they regularly talk about orienting themselves so that up is whatever direction they want it to be. This isn't a roof you climb out in one direction and you always have your orientation in the same way. You might, for one move, say, okay, that is my new up to the right. I'm going to pretend like I'm climbing in that direction. Rather than thinking this is a move to the right, it is I am orienting my body so that the climb is to the right. And this might sound like silly minutia, but this could be the world of a difference in how you approach things. Also, if you're a coach, this is incredibly important. This is how you connect with people. I used to coach someone who would regularly say this phrase, it feels like I'm falling downhill when I do cross moves. What does that mean? There's an interesting thing that is the way they perceived this move. I could easily be like, oh, weird. Okay. That wouldn't make me a good coach, obviously. So I have to figure out what does that mean? And as a climber, you can take these same things. When you hear David Fitzgerald talk about climbing the Big Z, V16 out in Tahoe, he referred to it as drowning in tension. How many times have you drowned in tension? That tells you a lot about the way that he climbs, his style. What can you take from that? Beta is no longer simple lefts and rights. My left hand goes here, my right foot goes there. I twist. There's macro beta, which is that. There is the micro beta, which is all these subtleties of how I'm shifting, my pacing, my speed of a move, how powerful am I going. And there's almost a layer below that, which is these concepts that we hold in our mind as we are doing moves. And those are just as valuable when you're at the point that you are at now. Number 87. Anything is better than zero. This was a lesson I learned really early on in life. When I was in second grade, I hated doing homework. I mean, let's be honest, I hated doing homework forever. That was just not a fun part of school in general, but in second grade, I was really bad about it. And I honestly just wouldn't do it. One day, my second grade teacher pulled me aside. We walked over to a computer and she pulled up whatever the equivalent of Excel was. And she started typing in numbers into the cells. She said, okay, these are your grades. Let's say you have 10 different assignments and, you're a good student. Let's say you get 5 100s. You just do great. And then you don't turn in 5 of your homeworks. So you get 5 zeros. Then she showed the average and she was like, that means you get a 50, which to me blew me away. I was like, wow, how is that possible? I have all of these 100s I've earned. You're going to take them away from me because I didn't do homework? I was betrayed. And she was like, yeah, you would get a 50. And so she was like, let's just say, instead of zeros, let's say you just try and do something. How hard is it to get a 60? I was like, I don't think it's that hard. She was like, yeah, you've never gotten a 60 before, so it probably doesn't take that much effort to get a 60, right? I was like, yeah. She was like, okay, well, let's replace these zeros with 60s. Now look what happens. And it's an 80. And I was like, oh. She's like, yeah, that's not just passing. That's okay. You can do better. Absolutely. And I want you to do your homework and do it well. That would be much better. But anything is better than a 0. And maybe a better lesson for me would have been be strict, do your homework, go above and beyond, get 100 and everything. But that wasn't the lesson I learned. Instead, it was anything is better than a 0. And you know what? That's great advice. I also was just reflecting. I was super lucky to have that kind of one-on-one lesson at that time. Now let's circle this back to climbing. Climbing isn't as addictive as it once was. Most likely, if you're an advanced climber. Some of that, it's twofold. One, maybe some of the shininess wore off. When you first start, that's all you can think about. It's all you talk about. It is all that life centers around. But as you've been doing it more, maybe that initial shininess wore off. The other thing too, and this one's very important, is as people become more advanced in climbing, that takes time. The other thing that happens with a lot of time is we get more life responsibilities. Maybe you're now in a relationship that you care about and that you want to put a lot of time into. Maybe you have a career instead of just a job. You might have family that you have to take care of. Whatever it is, responsibilities add up over time. Because of this, it's easy to start collecting zeros. Maybe you do go in and you give some good, great efforts in the gym or out at the crag, but you've got this deadline for work, so you take a 0. You miss a day out or you just don't go to the gym, you don't do anything. And maybe you've got a family thing on the weekend, so we take a 0. Before you know it, you've got a lot of zeros. It doesn't feel like it. You may have a more fulfilling life than when you only pursued climbing, and so it doesn't truly feel like zeros. Like, you had to go to your kid's baseball game? 0. Like, okay. We don't necessarily need to feel that way. But in terms of climbing performance, there's zeros. Chasing optimal is cool. That's really a fun thing to think about and hypothesize about. Like, what would it be like if I could do perfect training? If I could live in a perfect world and do everything optimally? It's a fun mental exercise to go through. But for most of us, perfection isn't achievable, and often trying to chase it too much kind of misses the point. We don't need to take our 90% sessions and make them 100%. We got to get rid of the zeros. If this sounds like you, try becoming part of the anti-zero club. Anything is better than nothing. And so to give you a quick example here, because I'm saying, zeros and you have a 90% session and 100%, and we just want something. This could be as simple as, you know what, I can't go climbing today, but I own 2 kettlebells and a hangboard. I'm going to do some swings, some presses, some rows, and a couple of hangs. I'll set a timer for 30 minutes. I'll get as much work in as I can before the rest of the day starts. Done. That's not a 0. We take those. It doesn't have to be much. Literally anything is better than nothing. Lastly, this is also very valuable for people whose motivation wanes throughout the year. Maybe you love outdoor rock climbing, and the second the season's here, once you have that first cool, crisp day of fall where it's a little warm, but that cool breeze comes through, you get goosebumps and you're like, yeah, it's here. We're ready. Let's go rock climbing every day. Amazing. Some of us just have that. But let's say the other 6 months of the year, you're just not feeling it. Still get rid of the zeros. Because what that does is if you're even just doing anything, you're getting 50s. That means when the season does start and your motivation's here, you're already in okay shape. You can kind of hit the ground running a little bit more. You're not going to go from 0 to 100 and make your elbows cranky, make your fingers kind of sore. We've already got a bit of a base. Not to mention, For a lot of people, climbing a little bit harder and feeling a little more fit is a lot more fun. So if you can enter that season feeling a little more fit and strong, you're going to have so much better of a time. If all that means is, you know what, 2-3 days a week, let's just punch the clock, get something small and simple done, it's worth it. All right, y'all, thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are here. Are there any things that you disagree with? Things that maybe I used a different language that you hadn't heard before that connected with you? Honestly, as a coach, that's super useful. I like to know when things are helpful so that I can keep bettering my craft. But also, if you heard something and you're like, this is neat, but I have another way of thinking about it that might add to this conversation, please share that. I appreciate so much when y'all take the time to leave those responses down below. That means a lot, and it helps make me a better coach and a better presenter for y'all so that hopefully I can keep giving you good, high quality information and help you get better at climbing and enjoy it a little bit more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.